this is a site that I read every day called Hacker News. And this is a little bit like Digg or Reddit. You know, most of you are probably familiar with this kind of a presentation. This is news articles that hackers are interested in. And so what I like about Hacker News is that it's curated by hackers for hackers. It's not a mainstream news site. There are no editors at Hacker News. In the same model as Digg or any other of these sort of crowdsourced news sites, the community creates the front page. And I find it probably the single most useful news service in the world for me, for what I do. I'm not saying it's would be for you, but for me, it's more useful than anything else out there by a long shot. This is the Huffington Post. This is a news article that broke, I think, yesterday. The guy who's running for Senate in Connecticut. Anybody here from Connecticut? Okay, this is your man. Apparently shock, politicians not telling the truth. Anyway, but you know, I just wanted to point out this. So, you know, you see a lot of these all around the web, but you know, these are becoming the distribution mechanisms for news, and this is from Huffington Post. And Huffington Post, I think, has done a particularly good job embracing the distribution that's available on the web. We can argue about their content and whether they have stolen it from other people, or, I mean, there's lots of issues about the Huffington Post that it's fine to debate, but the thing that they have done incredibly well is they've optimized their website for Google first, and then for the social web. And they have built a very large audience very quickly in the news business by using tools like this much more liberally and much more aggressively than the traditional news organizations. So they have used technology, not content, as their competitive advantage. And if you look at their organization, they have more programmers than they have editors. And that is, in their model, the secret to their success. So back to the iPad. My kids were doing crossword puzzles last night on the iPad. I took this picture, and they told me that they find doing crossword puzzles on the iPad more fun than crossword puzzles on the paper. It shouldn't be surprising. People have been doing crossword puzzles on computers for a long time, but I think what's interesting about a format like the iPad is that it is, for something like this, I think, clearly a better format than either the computer or the paper version. It's sort of the perfect format for crossword puzzles. And we now compete every morning. Used to compete for, like, you know, on Saturday morning we get the New York Times Sunday magazine. Everyone would compete to grab the crossword puzzle. Now everybody competes to grab the iPad to do the crossword puzzle. So that's an example of big changes happening in our family. So I'm going to end with this observation. I've been saying this for a long time now, at least 5 years. I don't want to consume content that I can't engage with. I don't want to read the newspaper in paper form. I don't want to read a book in book form. I don't even really want to read a book in the Kindle. To me, is missing a lot of the key things that I want to do. If you think back to that boxy screen where I'm watching the video on TV, and I can simply, with the remote, hit share and send it out to thousands of people. Can't do that on a Kindle. At least I don't know how to do that on a Kindle. You can do it on a Kindle?
The next version's coming out later this month. Allows you to post out to Facebook and to Twitter, I believe, selections. So you can highlight quotes and then blast it out.
That's terrific. So that is a game changer for me. I don't want to consume content in a vacuum. It doesn't feel natural to me anymore. And I think that's probably true of our children's generation for sure. It may even be true of the generation that's hit the workforce in the past 5 or 6 years. And so where I want to go with this, I'm going to talk for another 5 minutes and then I'm going to open up for questions, is I think that when content becomes highly lubricated and highly liquid and meets technology where entrepreneurs can do lots of interesting things with the technology, creates the best experiences for the users, and creates the most distribution for the content, reach the most readers, and will be consumed the most. There are questions about business model for sure, and I think that for people who, for businesses where tightly controlling the content and maximizing the amount of money they get on a single instance of consumption, I think that will not work well in the digital world. I think the models where the content is monetized in the point of consumption and that the transaction happens in the digital medium in real time as opposed to in advance, I think provide much more opportunity for entrepreneurs to build interesting consumption and distribution platforms for the content that content companies are making. So I actually think that the music business is probably a good place to look for innovation and a good place to look for what the future models are going to be for consumption. And thinking about ways to monetize the business long term, look for those models where the content has been available on the internet in a highly liquid form for the longest period of time, as opposed to looking for models like the kind that Rupert Murdoch wants to propose, where the content's going to stay locked up and it's going to be put very high price points on, and very few people are actually going to be able to consume it. I think that is, unfortunately, the wrong approach to be taking because it really encumbers the ability for content and technology to come together. And Chris was saying that, Chris Hart and I were talking right before we got started, that there's a movement in the publishing industry to go straight to XML now, right? Instead of laying out the book in the traditional way, just go straight to XML and then put the style sheets on and essentially, you know, treat the physical copy as yet one additional way to render the book. And I think that's a very good way to think about it. If all books are basically available in XML form and available on any device or any distribution platform, and there are no restrictions, I think that the publishing industry will make faster, better progress in its movement to digital. And the other thing Chris told me was that the numbers are something like 12 or 13% now, digital versus analog, and that 12% is probably up, you know, 7 or 8% in the past year. So we may get to 25% in the next year. You think about the slope of that curve. It's not going to be too many more years, probably 2 or 3 years, before the majority of all books are being purchased in digital form. So it's time to start focusing on these issues now. And with that, I'll turn it open to questions.